Is it fair to say that your initial impressions of him was that he was intelligent and charming?
Oh, yeah, well, he was intelligent. I wouldn't call it charming. I thought, he might have used the phrase that I thought he was shy. He didn't engage in conversations or initiate conversations, so I thought he was just shy.
Do you recall previously stating that your sister was attracted to his dry sense of humor?
Yes, I think that would be a fair statement.
And did you also notice that he had a dry sense of humor?
Yeah, it was kind of, if someone had tripped, he would laugh at it. That kind of sense of humor, if you want to call that dry.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So that is obviously an audio clip from the original beginning of the trial before it was postponed, and you were listening to Kathie's older brother talking about Robert Durst as someone who was a kind of an interesting character, someone with a dry sense of humor, to put it mildly, but also someone who he described as intelligent, not necessarily charming. The reason I'm fascinated with this particular case is because there are so many dumb criminals that we deal with. The challenge is sometimes just filling in the spaces, the puzzle pieces that are missing, but essentially you're dealing with some of the bottom dwellers of society, not the smartest tools in the shed. And so what makes the Durst case quite unique is it's someone from the upper echelons of society, someone who was to some extent quite well educated. I think he fell out of university to some extent, but was from kind of a privileged background as well, but also he wasn't a dumb guy. He did make some stupid mistakes as well. All criminals do. But what makes this particular case fascinating is his how smart he is, and also the resources that he had access to. And then in addition to that, if you think about it, law enforcement have been pursuing him for around about 40 years. Now, if you think about Chris Watts being caught within arguably hours, if you really want to argue how long it took to sort of nail Chris Watts, it was maybe a day or two. Other people, it's perhaps a month. The Barry Morphew case is approximately 1 year. Well, here's someone who's eluded authorities for 40 years. And you may look at him as this old guy, and he is old, and what is the point in even prosecuting him? But the other side of it is how impressive, I don't know if that's really the right word, impressive, but in terms of true crime, I wonder whether one couldn't call Robert Durst kind of a top achiever in that area. In this episode, what I want to do is play a clip from Peter Wilk, Dr. Peter Wilk, a surgeon who was actually on trial today in the California versus Robert Durst trial, and he provided some pretty touching testimony and quite tragic in a way. This was a guy who said he felt guilty for decades. Why? Because he said Kathie told him she thought she was in danger. She told him she thought her husband might kill her, and then she disappeared. And then her husband reappeared on trial for another murder, and then another one. So when asked how he could remember his interaction with Kathie so clearly, Dr. Wilk said, because I've thought of that conversation 1,000 times. And while I feel for Dr. Wilk, I sort of feel frustrated as well. I feel frustrated that instead of thinking of that conversation 1,000 times, perhaps he could have reached out. And you might say to who? Well, to family members, to law enforcement, perhaps to true crime channels. We're seeing that happening in the Barry Morphew case, where certain family members are actively engaging with media folk and are involved. And so in a moment we're going to listen to Dr. Wilk's testimony from today, but some of it's not very clear, so I want to read to you some of the transcript to what he said. He was asked, can you remember what your interaction was with Kathie? And he said, to the best of my memory, everything just came spilling out, pouring out. She was very emotional. She was shaking. She was traumatized. She said that she was going through a divorce and that it was a terrible time. She was shaking. And then she said that she actually had been interested in surgery and that she'd ranked at number 1. She wanted to do that, but she couldn't because of all the unpleasantness. So this doctor was actually someone that she had to report to while she was studying. I think he was in charge of a clerkship or clerkmanship or something like that. And she was sort of not attending classes and quite a lot of absenteeism, and her grades were slipping, and it was sort of his duty. He would, through the course of events, be checking on all the kind of interns, but Kathie was one of them. But there was also an important reason that he speak to her because of her performance, and so he wasn't really getting the response that he expected. I've been working as a waitress, or I've got a boyfriend, or I've been partying, or I'm pregnant or something. It was a woman who was married to Durst, who was going basically through a divorce and was struggling to keep it together. And then he said, what did she say about that unpleasantness? And she said it was her husband. She mentioned that she had been married for 8 years, and he was an older person, 10 years older, and that he was violent. Now, I think that's also quite interesting, the age gap between them. Bear in mind, it's an age gap between fairly young people, right? And if I sometimes think controlling people and also sometimes insecure men want much younger women so that they are able to control them economically through their personality and so on. Anyway, and so he seemed to be doing that. According to Dr. Wilk, Kathie said he was violent, and then she used a word that he said he'd never heard before. She said there was a homicidal side to him and he said that was shocking to him. And what kind of stood out in his testimony as well, and I'll put a link in the description, is basically just highlighting the testimony of today, and I want to continue doing that for the remainder of the trial, just highlighting a segment of it that stands out to me. He was sort of asked, why would you remember that conversation? Why would it stick in your head for decades? And his answer was that this is one of the I think this was the most emotional he'd seen a person in his life, or something like that. That someone completely broke down in front of him, and that was shocking to him. And then what she said was also shocking. So it was a combination of a couple of things: how emotional she was. Another person on the stand today described her as frantic, right? And so she was frantic, and what she said was shocking. And then it's also not just, I was arguing with my boyfriend, you've got to bear in mind who her boyfriend was, this powerful multimillionaire family who everybody sort of knew about. And it's not just that, it's also the aftermath where she disappears, and then there's a long story arc that happens after this moment, which this doctor remembers, right? And so if we go just to another witness, Fadwa Najami, she said that Kathie was an outgoing medical student, and then she made an unexpected appearance at her family's Sunday evening dinner on the night of January 31st, 1982. And she was described as upset, frantic, the way that she came to the house. And then suddenly there was a change in her. There's a phone call, and she heard Kathie on the phone suddenly sounding pleasant and calm, and she said that she loved him. And then the next thing, tail between her legs, and she went back to Robert Durst, and I think she disappeared shortly after that, never to be seen again. And what she was saying when she testified was that that's exactly what victims of domestic violence do to survive. They toe the line, kind of thing. And so you've got these two chilling conversations, the one from I think it was a fellow medical student at the time, and the other one from the retired surgeon who was sort of someone that she had to report to. And so this surgeon literally is told by her that, I think my husband's going to kill me. And then it happens. And that is the part that is so chilling about this whole thing. And then he eludes authorities for another 40 years, kind of thing. So you can imagine if a controlling person says those words, I'm going to kill you or whatever, and then the victim rushes off in an emotional state and tells people what's happened, what it can do to a paranoid controlling figure. Isn't he going to try to take even greater control? And now let's listen into the actual testimony from Dr. Wilk.
Did she specifically discuss with you what was interfering with her ability to do well in her clerkship? She did. What she like? To the best of your memory.
That's my memory. Everything just came spilling out before you. She was very emotional. She was shaking. She was crying. She said that she was going through the way, and it was a terrible thing. She said that she actually had been interested in surgery, that she ranked it number one. She wanted to do that, but she couldn't because of all the unpleasantness that was going on. There was violence involved, there were court proceedings, and there were lawyers, and there were therapists, and her life was a mess.
Did she tell you who was causing this unpleasantness?
Yes, she said it was her husband. She mentioned that she had been married for 8 years. He was an older person, 10 years older, and that we were really glad. She used a word that I've never heard used before. She said there was a homicidal side to it. And that was shocking to me. The concept that somebody could use that word that is. I asked her what she meant by that.
As she was telling you these things, was she still shaking and trembling as you described?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Did it appear to you she was under an extreme emotional state as she was telling you these things?
Yes.
Do you recall if she was crying?
She wasn't crying. No, she wasn't crying.
Did she tell you that this situation that she was describing, this fear she was expressing, was over or was currently going on in the current time?
Very much going on.
This is, as she expressed to you, as she was trembling, shaking.
Yes.
Did she?
I've sat in on quite a few trials, and I don't think there's a single trial I've sat in where the witness or a witness has been either admonished or encouraged or repeatedly asked to speak up or to speak clearly. And it's something that I find incredibly frustrating, is that, it's the 21st century, and you either have the witness who, is not trying to not be heard, but they often mumble, or they, it's quite traumatic things to discuss. they going into their memory, and so they absently are repeating what they want to say. But I just find it just incredible that in the 21st century, either you can't have a microphone that can just pick something up in a clear way, or that you can sort of stop the witness and, I don't know, like force them to speak up, because so often the part that is most crucial, that you almost don't even hear the word. When he actually says the word violence, you almost don't hear the word. It's almost like it tunes out. And that is a problem that's not only faced by journalists trying to report on this, but also by a judge, by jurors. And, you know, that's why you have a trial, is to hear testimony and to finally bring things that have been hidden to the surface. And then, you are in the court and you actually can't hear what the person's saying. And I'm just saying it's incredibly frustrating, because a lot of these, I've seen it in so many trials, almost every single trial I've been in without exception. Someone is told to speak up and they just don't, and you tell them again and again and again. But, you know, you would imagine with the technology we have, you could fine-tune a microphone that is going to, you know, make what they're saying a lot louder or something like that. I just find it just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous problem that is going on, and it needs to stop. In any event, I'm not going to take it further than that. There was, I think, there is the additional matter of the call that Susan Berman made, something like 20 years after she made that call, possibly impersonating Kathie Durst. There's the allegation now that Robert Durst got nervous when that happened, and that nervousness actually cost her life. In any event, we're going to continue on with this deep dive into the Durst case, just highlighting some of the nuggets in testimony from this unusual case. So if you're interested in that and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.
If anything happens to me, don't let them get away with it.